So I wrote the book because I wanted people to see that it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be boring or mundane. It can be something that you really enjoy. And it actually, when you get into it, you end up saving time. You end up saving money. And it's a lot less stressful during the week. You don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, I'm getting off work. It's 4:30. What am I going to have for dinner? You already know everything's already ready. Most of the meals you can, if you're doing the prep, you can throw them together in 10 or 15 minutes at night for dinner, and it saves so much time.
You are listening to The Foundation of Wellness, a refreshing take on diet and lifestyle. Join me, Marisa Moon, as we tackle modern health with innovative and ancient principles. I'm a certified Primal health coach and intermittent fasting instructor at marisamoon.com. Hey, how's it going out there? It's me, Marisa. I'm so glad you're listening to The Foundation of Wellness. And today we have a great show where we're going to get into a little bit about meal prep and meal planning and why it doesn't need to be so intimidating. But once you get into it, it's going to free you up and make you and your family feel really good about eating healthier. And our guest for today is Dana Johnson from Primal Wife, Happy Life. After years of suffering from depression, anxiety, and pharmaceutical dependency, Dana Johnson found a way to heal herself by overhauling her lifestyle and her diet. She's been free for several years and is on a mission to teach other women how to bolster their lifestyle habits. She's a certified Primal health coach who helps women lose fat and gain energy through faith, nutrition, and pharma-free living. In her latest book, Primal Wife, Happy Life's Guide to Menu Planning and Meal Prep, she busts the myth that eating clean is expensive and complicated. Dana lives in Northern California with the love of her life and their 2 daughters. You can get Dana's menu planning and meal prep guide. It's so great. We're talking about it all in today's episode. But go ahead and head to the link bit.ly/happylifebook. That's bit.ly/happylifebook. And Dana's website is primalwifehappylife.com. Here we go. Hey, Dana. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to have a fellow Primal health coach here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here too. Thank you so much.
Well, I just had to have you on the show when you said you were great at meal prep, especially when it comes to having little kids at home.
Oh, yeah, it's so important.
Yeah, and I saw your ebook and it's awesome, and I can't wait to share it with our audience. But I'd really like to hear a little bit about your story because I remember it being pretty moving. How did you get into health and wellness like you are today?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I love sharing my story with people because I think that a lot of people sometimes suffer in silence, not knowing what to do. But with me, I had postpartum depression with both of my children. My kids are 12 years apart. So the first time I got it, I said, okay, this is probably, par for the course because I was young. My life wasn't that great. So I figured, okay, took the medication for a few years and weaned myself off and went on with my life. And then fast forward 12 years later, I was married to the man of my dreams, had my dream job, had everything in my life was perfect, had this beautiful baby, and then got postpartum depression again. And so that was just devastating. I didn't understand why, because everything was so perfect and it was so much worse than the first time. I mean, I know that it presents differently for everybody, but for me, I was in constant fear. I thought that bad things were happening to my family. I was like hearing things. It was just horrible. And I hesitated going on the medication again. So what seemed like a long time, my husband finally, after a few days, he was like, you've really got to go see the doctor. I'm worried about you. So I ended up getting on the medication again, and fast forward 3 years, I was still on the medication.
Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't feeling back to myself, but
Was it like a depression medication or?
it was like an antidepressant medication, but then the antidepressant medication gave me anxiety. So then I had to be on another medication. So they were constantly trying to figure out this cocktail of what would work for me. And the thing that really got to me was my husband. This is like 3 years down the road after, my daughter's 3 years old now, and I still feel like I'm living in this bubble. And my husband had a death in the family, somebody really close to him, and he was sitting there sobbing, and I couldn't cry. And I thought, I've got to stop this. And
Mm.
so I, talked to my doctor again, hey, I'd really like to, explore other options. Is there anything I can do? Like, I kind of instinctively knew that there could be another option. Maybe there's something with my lifestyle habits, like stress, sleep, food, exercise. What can I do different? So I was kind of exploring those kinds of things, but the doctor never made that connection with me. She did send me a list a mile long of herbal tinctures that I could try, but her and I worked together to wean myself off of the medication. But in a miraculous event one day, I walked by my coworker's desk at work, and she was eating an avocado for breakfast. And I stopped and I said, "Wait a second. You're like this athlete, you've got this very fit body, you've got all this energy. How in the world are you eating an avocado for breakfast?" Because, I've always learned that you can't eat avocado in abundance because it's too fattening. And and so she said, "Yeah, I mean, I follow this blog. It's all about primal nutrition. Have you heard of it?" And I said, "No, but like if you can eat avocados for breakfast, I must know everything about this." And so she pointed me to the direction of Mark's Daily Apple, which is a great blog. I love that blog.
Me too.
Yeah, and I read about it. I ended up signing up to do like the 21-day challenge that they offer on the blog, and I did that, and it literally changed my life. I was able to stop the medication soon after that 21 days.
Mm.
I had energy that I hadn't felt probably my whole life. I was just a different person, and it totally changed my life. And so I thought, I've got to do this. I mean, I need to share this with other people.
Yeah.
So that's,
Incredible.
yeah, I decided to go forward and get my certification through Primal Health Coach, and um, I've just been moving forward ever since.
Amazing. What was it like taking on a 21-day challenge at that point? I mean, it sounds like you were really motivated because you did a lot of reading on marksdailyapple.com, but then it must have been so new to you. Was it overwhelming, or were you just like, I don't care what it takes? And what was the challenge like?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think everybody reaches a point where they no longer rely on willpower, and they have this just deep commitment to making a change.
Hmm.
And I honestly think as a health coach that people aren't ready until they feel that.
Yeah.
And that was the point that I was at. And so no matter what, I was going to finish at least that 21 days. And I told my husband, we're going to eat differently for 21 days. Like, just bear with me. I'm going to cook all these different meals. And I really want to do this, because he, fully supported me getting off of the medication and everything too. But the 21 days was, I, there, they sent me like the book, the 21-day challenge. So every day it gives you tasks and what you need to look for and what you need to do. So everything was right there. So for people who are really self-motivated and already have that level of like, I can do this, it's actually a great resource. So for me, I was able to do that and be successful. Some days were more difficult than others. Just there was a point where, if you're eating like the standard American diet and not taking care of your sleep habits, your stress habits, and you change everything, there's a point at about 4 to 5, 6 days where you just feel like gross. You feel
Hmm.
yucky. And so that was kind of difficult. But on the other side of that feeling was pure freedom.
Amazing. What was your diet like before?
It wasn't, I mean, I always thought that I was kind of a healthy eater, but I was always conscious of what I was eating, but I was conscious in what I learned is the wrong things. Like, I was focused on calorie counting and low fat and, um, you know, limiting my goodies. So in my mind, I had justified like, drinking smoothies for lunch rather than a real lunch, because it was, fruits and vegetables. But I learned that that was just giving my body, straight glucose and no real energy. And
Wow.
so, yeah, and then, coffee every morning. And then, of course, you stop by your favorite coffee place and you grab like one of their pastries. And it's okay because it's just once a day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how my diet was, the way I ate before I found Primal. But
Whoa.
one thing that I realized with Primal is that it was so liberating because as long as I gave up a few key types of foods, I could eat whenever and whatever I wanted. And at first that was really awesome because when you first transition, you find yourself to be a little bit, you want to eat, you're craving all this stuff. And after a while, you get past that and I mean, you really only need to eat a couple times a day. You've got these really satiating foods that you're eating and it's just, it's great.
Whoa. I mean, what do you attribute most of the success from to really transform your mental health and well-being in such a big way in 21 days? Even if you were like a pseudo conventional healthy eater before that, there must have been like one of those changes that really like leveraged your results. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I think for me it was grains. The biggest thing for me was cutting out the grains because I had
All grains,
always
what did you get rid of?
all grains. I went 100% all in. So I really feel like and in my coaching program I do that. I mean, you've got to go all in and do a complete elimination to realize what's actually ailing you.
Mm,
And so when I did that elimination for the 21 days and then tried slowly adding, in addition to the mental health clarity and the energy, I stopped being as bloated all the time. I thought that I had this like gastrointestinal issue that like ran in my family because everybody's bloated all the time. Everybody's got all this gas and it's like
right.
this uncomfortable feeling. Um, but I realized when I stopped eating grains that I didn't have that problem anymore, amazingly.
Yes. What a relief.
Yeah, and it is such a relief. And I mean, then you learn about the connection between your gut and your brain, and you realize how it is very likely that when you heal your gut, a lot of those mental clarity issues and issues with sadness and anxiety and things like that can kind of go to the wayside.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That gut brain connection is so fascinating. And what a lot of us never knew our entire lives is that so many of our actual neurotransmitters, like the messengers that dictate our mood, are actually in our gut.
Yeah.
And wow, no wonder what we feed ourselves actually affects our mood if that's the case. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It is amazing.
well, how have you brought that into your home now? Because you're a mother of two, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a 19-year-old who's on her own now. She's living in Seattle and being a
Wow.
grown up. I'm just so proud of her.
Yeah.
Um, and and then I have my 7-year-old. So it's funny because my 19-year-old, at one point when she was like in third grade, because I've always been more like what I considered health conscious. So I wouldn't shop at regular grocery stores. I always shopped at Trader Joe's. And she even
Mm-hmm.
told me one time, she's like, Mom, can't we shop at regular grocery stores like all my friends? Like, but now I love watching her because she's like exploring her own nutritional journey and she's shopping and cooking for herself and really appreciates all of those, lessons that I instilled in her. But having my 7-year-old at home, it's really important to me to, it took a while to, my daughter's going to eat whatever I make because I'm the one that cooks in the house, right? But for my husband, it was a transition. So, I mentioned in the book, it's funny, like I made this beautiful dairy-free pasta sauce, and he went and grabbed a bunch of cheese to sprinkle on top of this cashew sauce that I made. I was like, that's kind of beside the point. But so it was a transition, but he's finally, I mean, we've been at this for several years now, and it's been a journey, but as long as I've got the food ready and make it real yummy, like your taste kind of change after you transition, and it ends up being something that you really enjoy. So
Wow. What was it
yeah.
like in the beginning, though? Were you making something different for your husband and something different for your 7-year-old? Her 5-year-old at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would just make whatever I was going to make. So the big thing was I cut out the grains, so no more pasta, no more rice, things like that. And I cut out the dairy for the first 21 days, but we still do a little bit of dairy, um, and like beans and stuff like that. So like if we had like taco bowls, he would just have a can of beans, open that and heat that up for him and Ava if they wanted to have that, or just make adjustments that way.
Hmm.
And now that we've been at it for a while, if we want to have a meal that calls for like rice once in a while, I'll do that because it's not. Um, I go by the 80/20 rule. So yeah, I'm not going to be like a dictator in my home, like, no, you must eat this all the
Hmm.
time. But yeah. But I figure like with Ava, I prep her lunches every week and I make things that are like really delicious, but also yummy. Like I have a recipe for pudding that I make out of coconut milk and cacao, organic cacao powder, and she gets to have pudding at school where her friends might be eating the prepackaged kind. She gets a homemade one that's really delicious and she loves. So she's not missing out in that regard.
Killer. And that's in your cookbook too, right? The
Yeah.
chocolate pudding.
Well,
Nice. And
there's
just
this
so,
chocolate pudding squares, but you can make the pudding and keep it by itself.
oh, neat. Love that. You guys, the ebook that she's created for everyone is Primal Wife Happy Life's Guide to Menu Planning and Meal Prep. And they can grab that at bit.ly/happy life book. And that link will also be in the episode description and show notes. So tell us about this book, because honestly, it sounds like something that's really needed. Everybody knows that they should be meal prepping or meal planning, but they never really get into the rhythm because it overwhelms them. Or it seems like you need to have 6 hours of cooking time every week if you really want to meal prep or make several meals homemade for your family.
Yeah, and that's why I wrote the book because people have this idea in their mind of meal prep being either they're thinking about you see pictures of like 7 dishes of salmon with green beans
Mm-hmm.
and you're eating that all week. Gross. Nobody wants to eat that for 7 days. I mean, some people might, but most people, I've tried that way before and you end up with like 5 rotting Tupperware containers in the back of your refrigerator by the end of the week because you're just like, by day 2, you're like, forget it, and you run through the Chick-fil-A drive-through on your way home from work. So I wrote the book because I wanted people to see that it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be boring or mundane. It can be something that you really enjoy. And it actually, when you get into it, you end up saving time. You end up saving money. And it's a lot less stressful during the week. You don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, I'm getting off work. It's 4:30. What am I going to have for dinner? You already know everything's already ready. Most of the meals you can, if you're doing the prep, you can throw them together in 10 or 15 minutes at night for dinner, and it saves so much time.
So how
It's
far in advance are you prepping so that you have this 15-minute dinner creating session? Like that's quick. Like if I could come home, I mean I love to cook too, so I'm just
yeah,
representing a listener right now. But
yeah.
like it's 6 o'clock, I'm tired, I worked all day, and I would love to get dinner on the table in 15 minutes. What's the trick here?
Yeah, so I talk about essentials prepping. So you prep the essentials for the week. So you decide what you want to eat for the week and you you use your items in a smart way. So like let's say you want chicken. Okay, so you do like a shredded chicken recipe. I have the easiest shredded chicken recipe, or you can cook a chicken in the crock pot on Sunday, and then you get the chicken shredded you have in the fridge. You pre-make all your sauces. So like we have sauces that we use every week in our house. We use like I make a homemade mayonnaise every week. That's
Okay.
like once you make homemade mayonnaise, you never want to go back, even though there are some really delicious like avocado oil mayonnaise that you can buy in the store, but this homemade one takes like less than 2 minutes. It's so easy. And you make all these yummy sauces. So you can make ranch dressing out of it, chipotle sauce. And so let's say you have this shredded chicken, right? And you've got your sauces ready. You pre-bake some sweet potatoes at the beginning of the week, and you can have 3 meals with that. So you can have sweet potatoes chopped up with some scrambled eggs and maybe kielbasa for breakfast or lunch, whatever. And then you can have a meat with some veggies and some mashed sweet potatoes, and then you can use the shredded chicken to make a stuffed chipotle stuffed sweet potato for another meal. So you have all the main components ready, and then you just throw the meals together that way.
So I'm kind of like imagining, so you're saying Sunday you're cooking this whole chicken or you're shredding up your rotisserie chicken, whatever, and then you are dicing up one sweet potato, you're baking another one so that it's baked in advance, ready to go, and that way you have some diced up ready for, oh, and then maybe you're roasting an extra one so that you can mash it later.
Yeah, you
So you're
just,
kind of doing
yeah.
all that at one time, but you don't actually prepare it fully until that dinner night.
Correct, yeah. So I
Okay.
would just pre-bake like three sweet potatoes and
Hmm.
just do them till they're not fully totally
Oh, that's
soft.
even easier than dicing
Yeah,
one in advance. Okay, so all three of them were baking
yeah,
on Sunday, and then you actually prepare them three different ways throughout the week. So you're not eating
yeah,
the same dang thing. Yeah, this is awesome. I
yeah,
love it. Cool. So
yeah.
you also have other like prepping ideas. Like you have a signature method. Is that the one? It's like, one food, three ways. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so it's 3 ways and then the essentials prepping. So like you make all your sauces, you make all your essential components. We do a lot of crudités, which is like cut up veggies throughout the week. How
Oh,
many times have you gone to the grocery store or the listeners out there and you're like, I'm going to eat really healthy this week, and you buy all this fruits and vegetables and then they sit in your fridge and rot because you haven't
yep.
washed them, they're not ready. Because when you want a snack, what do? You grab for the easiest thing, right?
So
And
true.
so yeah, so that's kind of behind the essentials prepping. You prepare all the veggies, get them in, their containers so that they're easy to grab. You're setting yourself up for success throughout the week. So
Wow.
it's like really tuning in. Let me be honest with myself and say, okay, when I'm hungry, I just want to grab something. And so you just have those things ready to grab.
And what about storing them? Like, how do you store all of those like fresh cut? What kind of things are you making into crudités, number one, and how are
Okay.
you storing them?
For us, our family, we do celery and carrots every single week and cucumbers. And
Easy.
then like the little mini tomatoes. So the cucumbers I cut as I eat them, and so those don't really store very well for more than a day. But like the carrots and the celery, you wash them, and we buy mostly organic, but I put everything through a water and like a tablespoon of white vinegar soak before I rinse it and cut it and everything, just to kind of clean, make sure it's really clean. But yeah, you just slice those into little stick sizes that you can eat real easy. And for the carrots, I store a wet paper towel in the bottom of a glass dish with a lid that locks in. And so they keep a little bit moist. For the celery, I just reuse jars and put them in a jar with a little bit of water at the bottom so that they stay moist.
Nice and crunchy.
Yeah.
That's the way it's got to be. Well, you also gave lots of tips about, um, you know, saving money. Like, for instance, you mentioned the dirty dozen. Can you tell our listeners what that is?
Yeah, so not everybody wants to spend money on everything organic, because that is where it could get pricey. Just depends on what's the right choice for you and your family and your budget. And I talk a lot about, budgeting and things like that, how much you're willing to spend. But the Dirty Dozen it's a group of fruits and vegetables that are listed that should be bought. They're considered the most toxic if you buy them non-organic.
Mhm.
Um, like strawberries, for instance, have a lot of pesticides. A lot of the fruits that don't have peels and things like that.
Yeah.
Raisins is really, really bad. So like if you buy dried raisins, you want to make sure you buy organic. So I have
Good
that
point.
list just for reference.
Totally. And people can learn more about that at ewg.org. And they update it every year. There's just so many interesting little facts that they find out when they're testing everything, you guys. Pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. A lot of fruits can't be grown without these antifungals sprayed on them, but they also affect our microbiome. And so, you're wondering why you're getting sick all the time or why you are depressed or anxious all the time. There could be something going on there that's coming from your food. And so just using this dirty dozen as like your bare minimum list where you're like, okay, these are the places that we don't make exceptions. And I really aim for organic, or maybe I just don't get it this time around. Like I don't buy my favorite fruits all the time because I only buy them if they're organic and if they're on sale. And so that just means we're not eating nectarines all year round. We're not eating strawberries all year round. And, it just comes down to like a little lifestyle shift.
Yeah.
And the more you learn, the less overwhelming it is, I think, because you just kind of learn from practice and getting on the little like subscriber list from EWG, things like that, where it becomes more and more familiar as you go.
Yeah, and it's actually, you bring up a good point of buying the fruits that are on sale, and that's a really good indicator that they're in season. So if you're
Mm,
buying fruits at full price, they're probably not in season. So if you
yeah,
think about the abundance of a harvest, there's going to be a lot more available, and chances are those will be on sale when they're in season. So, um,
great tip.
yeah.
Well, there's so many good things in here, but I wanted to know if you have any tips to prevent having your vegetables spoiling in the back of your fridge because you didn't have any time. You overbought, you were over ambitious, and now you just realize your week is flying by and you just don't have time to make dinner and you failed again. You feel like you failed. Do you have any tips besides prepping the vegetables into crudités? Like, are there last minute, like, save the veggie operations that can go down?
Oh, totally. And trust me, I mean, I'm not perfect and nobody's perfect in this. The one thing that I want to mention is for everybody, especially if you're just trying or maybe you've tried before and you feel like you failed, is give yourself a really nice balance of accountability and grace because grace goes a long way. And it's okay if that zucchini doesn't make it and you end up throwing it away. It's going to be okay. But I did learn a really great tip for zucchini. Some weeks are just really harder than others if you work a lot. And, on Friday, usually on Friday is the night where I tell my husband, let's just order something. And I know all the restaurants that I can eat my Primal approved foods from. So, but we did that one week and the zucchini was sitting in the fridge. We were supposed to have zoodles and spaghetti, spaghetti sauce and spaghetti. So you can actually make zoodles out of that zucchini and put them in Ziploc bags and throw them in the freezer.
Yes.
And I did that, and like 2 weeks later, we had the zoodles, and they were perfectly delicious.
Awesome.
Um, and another great tip also for fruit, like if you end up with extra fruit at the end of the week or you just didn't get through it all, I love taking like a can of coconut cream and blending it together with the fruit that you didn't get to use and just making it into like a frozen treat, like a ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
Throw some vanilla, a little stevia in there, and got yourself some frozen ice cream treat.
Oh, that sounds really good. And you could like put in little ice cube trays and just throw them in your smoothie whenever you're making a smoothie. So
Oh yeah, that's a good idea too.
sometimes, like when you're in a bind and you're just kind of panicking, it's like you look at the fridge and you're like, I screwed up again. Like I'm not gonna make this stuff. But a lot of it, even if you just put it in the freezer, like if you just put those berries in the freezer without doing anything to them, like it gives you another week to figure out, like, is there some way I can use these? Do I have time to think about what is left here? Even if I've thrown whole zucchini and whole cucumbers in my freezer, and I'll either end up giving it to the dog if it already went moldy and they love it, or I'll throw it in a compost pile, which I know not everybody has a compost pile, but if you have a big planter that you're not using and it has old soil in it, you could literally throw those frozen vegetables in there and just use a little shovel and toss it around and it will decompose into new soil. It's pretty crazy.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good idea too. Another thing for the veggies is like you said, you just threw a whole one in there. You could take that out when you're making a batch of bone broth. So
Yeah.
throw those veggies that ended up in the freezer that didn't get used,
Yep.
throw those in the pot with your chicken bones. And I have a recipe in the book for bone broth. It's like the easiest thing you'll ever make. It takes time if you have a regular crock pot, but if you have an Instapot, you're going to have like delicious, nutritious bone
Mm.
broth in like a matter of hours. And you can use all of your leftover veggies that didn't get used in there.
Yes, totally. We do that in my house too. And the crock pot takes a while, but it's fine because you usually do it overnight while you're sleeping
Yeah,
anyway. And it makes your house smell so good, like homemade chicken soup. And
I
it's the
know.
best chicken soup you'll ever make. So definitely
Yeah,
want to try that.
so
In
good.
her
Yeah.
book is also banana nut muffins, chocolate pudding squares that she mentioned, Greek turkey burger, a baconator. That sounds pretty bomb. And everything in your book is grain free and low sugar. And are they dairy free too?
Most everything is dairy free. Like the Baconator, or excuse me, the Greek turkey burgers has a little bit of feta cheese, but
Mhm.
all of my baking recipes are dairy free.
Sweet.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Ava quite a few times in your book, and Ava is your 7 year old. When she first got into this new lifestyle with you, I'm sure she was pickier than she is now. Do you remember some things that you overcame with Ava? And do you have any tips for our listeners with picky eaters at home?
Oh yeah. And with Ava at that age, it's like a weekly thing. So I give a list in the book of lunch ideas because it's so different because my 19-year-old, she had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day, like her whole life through school. And because I thought that was like the best thing ever for her. But my 7-year-old, she's a lot more picky than that. And so, um, sometimes I give an, I would say as long as you have several things that you can choose from that are protein rich, that's kind of probably the most important thing to get into their lunches to kind of keep them satiated throughout the day so that they don't feel like they need to snack all day long. And then a couple of like a fruit, a veggie, a couple veggies, and just I give a list in the book of different ideas for all of those groups and then like a snack. But like
Okay.
for Ava, she really misses having sandwiches with bread. And I've tried several recipes for grain-free bread, and I actually just discovered one this last week that I made that was really, really pretty good. It's in one of Mark Sisson's book. It's in the Keto Reset
Cool. The
diet book.
cookbook
Yeah,
or the diet book. Okay.
it's yeah, the Reset book. It's called almond or nut pulp bread. It's actually the best grain-free bread that I've made.
That's awesome. I haven't been
Yeah.
making many homemade, but I did pay for the base culture keto bread that now is available at my Whole Foods market in the freezer. And at first you'd be like, you're absolutely crazy to drop $10 on a loaf of bread. But if you're not eating bread every single day, like in excess, like we used to, and it's low carb, which is honestly like a miracle, and it tastes like real toast. When we toast it, I'm like, this is crazy. It tastes like real toast. I don't know how they did it. It's a
Yeah.
miracle.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's worth the money. But I mean, and it's like smaller because without the gluten, it can't expand so much. So I think for kids, it would actually be the perfect size. But otherwise, if you can't go grain free completely with your kids, at least set a standard for it to be organic or to be sprouted. Because if
Yeah.
they're not organic, they're likely sprayed with all kinds of chemicals that can really cause food sensitivities down the line or mood imbalances and irritability in your children and who knows what else. So I think organic's a good place to start, and sprouted makes it even more digestible. And then you can kind of work your way up to healthier and healthier styles as your children are growing, because I know that's a big transition in the
Yeah.
beginning, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things I wanted to mention too is like kids, as long as they don't have to watch their carb intake like
Right.
I do, somebody who's, 45 years old. And so I don't worry too much about how many carbs she eats as long as it's like
No.
mostly whole foods, the least processed. But I'll get her an organic bread once in a while and
Yeah.
we'll go through that loaf and she'll have like her turkey sandwiches, the nitrate-free lunch meat, and then we'll switch the next week and have like organic beef jerky instead of sandwich for her protein. So she'll get her bread once in a while, and we're still working on getting her to enjoy a nice grain-free bread, but she's very smart. She can see past that. She's like,
Hmm.
this isn't like what I'm
Yeah,
used
they
to.
don't like new things, right?
Yeah.
But when she was like 5 and more picky, what kind of proteins were you giving her? Because I actually get asked that a lot, and I never even have kids. And so
Yeah.
I'm telling them all the proteins I know of under the sun, but that doesn't mean that they're kid friendly, especially for picky eaters. What are your recommendations for more protein in a kid's diet if they're picky?
Oh yeah. Well, I would just say have like curate your list of all the different ones, but like hummus is good. Um, I I like to give her like the regular chickpea hummus. And I
Hmm.
was making mine homemade, but then I realized that they have a really good one at the big box store that's like in individual sizes. It's organic and it has no preservatives. So I was like, hey, I'm just gonna buy that.
Yeah.
It's perfect for lunch. So hummus, we do yogurts like
Mhm.
full fat yogurts for her, for Ava. And beef jerky is a really good one. You just want to be careful that there's not a lot of added sugars or nitrates in them
Do
in
you
the
have
beef
like a
jerky.
soft one that the kids like? Because I know jerky can be really tough.
Yeah, there's actually a brand called Larissa's. It does have like a small amount of sugar in it, but it's for the most part clean. It's like
Mhm.
grass-fed beef, and that one seems a lot softer. Like there's
Mm.
some that are, I think if they're softer, that kind of means they're less processed.
They're
So
just
yeah.
more enjoyable to eat anyway, and especially for kids.
Oh yeah, and she loves that, and I do. Um, there's actually I bought this really yummy keto cereal. It's called can I give the name of it?
Yeah,
It's
please.
called Magic Spoon.
Yeah.
Have you tried that?
Yes, only a sample, and I was like, good God, I could eat this by the box full.
Yeah.
Tastes like the
So
real deal. They're like
it,
made to mimic our favorite childhood cereals, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you have like it's funny because I've ordered it twice. And so I give that, it's got high protein. It has 11 grams of protein per serving. Um, Minimal carbs, no processed sugar, and I do a serving size of that in Ava's lunch, and she thinks that she's getting a snack, but it's actually protein. Um, and it was funny
Hmm.
because my husband tried it for the first time. I've ordered it over the last 2 months like twice, and he just had a bite of it yesterday. He's like, oh, "This tastes like Fruit Loops." I'm like, "I've been trying to tell you, this stuff is
Yeah.
good."
I've heard it can pass any test. I mean, it
Yeah,
is, I think it's milk protein, like
yeah,
concentrate. So it depends if somebody like can really tolerate that. But especially if you're just rotating it in a couple times a week for a treat, there's not really nothing wrong with that if it's well tolerated. So it's a
yeah.
major score in the low carb industry, I gotta say.
For sure, yeah, and I totally agree with you on that. Just make sure that's something that's not impacting your gut.
Well, if you want to leave our listeners with any other last minute, like myth busting meal prepping advice, that would be great. Otherwise, it's just been so great to have you on here talking about something that everybody's curious about.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to leave everybody with this thought is that you're going to spend the time, if you're cooking for your family anyway, you're going to spend the time one way or another. You're either going to sit in the drive-through for a half an hour. I don't know about you guys, but the Chick-fil-A drive-through in our neighborhood is like out the door around the block. It's
Wow.
ridiculous. Or you're going to end up going last minute to the grocery store, or you're going to end up cooking that night. And so I say give it a shot. Try setting aside a couple hours when you first start doing it on a Sunday. It may take you longer the first time, and
Yeah.
give yourself some grace and patience. You can do this, but you really will get to a point where you feel like liberated. I love using that word freedom and liberation. You're just not
Mhm.
tied to the drive-through. You're not tied to the grocery store. You've got it under control and you can do this.
Yeah, and try not to think of it like something you've got to do. Do
Yeah.
it early in the day. Don't put it off. I mean, if you feel like you're really pressured for time, it's going to feel more stressful. Put on some really fun music and get the kids involved if you have to. First of all, that's a great idea
Yeah.
because the sooner you get them involved, the more foods they're going to want to eat,
Oh, yeah.
and the less you have to worry about trying to make sure they're not up to no good. And so I really think food prep becomes something that makes you happy, but when it always feels like you're crunched for time and you're disorganized, it's just always going to be overwhelming. So
Yeah.
take Dana's advice. grab the ebook. Again, you can get that at bit.ly/happylifebook, all one word. And the link to find Dana and her website at primalwifehappylife.com. All of that's in the episode description. And thanks so much for being here, Dana.
Thank you. So
You're
much
welcome.
fun.
Bye-bye. Well,
Bye.
that about does it. I wanted to chime in and let you know about my favorite wine from Dry Farm Wines. Whenever I tried to lose weight or clean up my diet in the past, or especially since I've been doing intermittent fasting for so many years, I felt like I needed to give up wine until I learned about Dry Farm Wines. Most wine is known for being high in sugar and problematic for weight loss and especially disruptive for intermittent fasting. But Dry Farm Wine makes it possible to stay in ketosis and know that you're not going to get those nasty wine headaches that I used to get all the time. This wine is actually tested for sugar and uses wild yeast and Dry Farm wine methods that are incredible for the earth and for the grapes so that you get wine that's completely clean and natural. Go to dryfarmwines.com/FOW podcast to help support this show while you get a free bottle of wine with your first order. Ask me questions anytime about my experience with Dry Farm Wines because I absolutely love it. And you can always find me on Instagram at Marisa_moon_ and in the Facebook group, the Foundation of Wellness Podcast. That's facebook.com/groups/FOW podcast. Bye.